Hello everyone, I'm Samantha Jane Smith.
And I'm Jacob Keynes, and you are listening to the Classical Queer Podcast. Welcome back to the Classical Queer Podcast, everybody. Today we are very, very thrilled to be joined by Teiya Kasahara, who is a performer, soprano, I would say also producer, collaborator, bringer together of many people and things, based in Toronto, but in many different places all the time, as I suppose many performers are. So welcome. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and to have a conversation with both of you. And meet you for the first time as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun for this podcast. We get to meet so many amazing people, and we're thrilled to meet you. We generally start with a bio, and I always say this can be as music-y as you want, as queer as you want, as academic-y as you want, but we always want to let people in their own voice kind of tell us who you are and what you do.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm Teiya. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm based here in Toronto in Treaty 13. I identify as Nikkei, which is the Japanese word for Japanese diaspora. I also am trans, non-binary, creator, performer, mostly in opera, but, dabbling into some electronic stuff, some alt classical, which I'm wanting to, make a thing that as opposed to crossover, but kind of expanding the classical genre with my colleagues and using technology. I love to play soccer. I have 2 cats. I'm married. I have a wife. That's about it, I guess.
Short and concise. It's good. I like that. I mean, maybe as a first jumping off point, I am fascinated by your phrase alt classical.
I was going to ask the same thing. I have no idea what that is. So give us a run.
Well, I don't know, short for alternative. I think, or just wanting to expand this classical genre that we have and opera in general. We have this canon of over 400 years, this tradition that has evolved. We've seen it evolve. We study this, with all the different eras and Western music theory has evolved as well too. And I think it's really exciting when classically trained musicians have been using technologies that we use in pop music and hip hop and rap and techno and wanting to just change, elevate, expand, evolve what classical music can do. And I think we saw a lot of that during COVID, just people stepping outside of their usual artistries and putting things online and being forced to use technology. So I think it's definitely opened up my mind in terms of what I can make and how I can make it, and kind of designing certain types of art for certain mediums as well too. So I don't know. I don't really know what to call the stuff that I do that isn't traditional opera or traditional concert work. So all the classical, I don't know.
I love it. I'm gonna with all credit given, steal that from you and start using it. I think it's a fascinating idea. I mean, I spend a lot of my time thinking about what it is that we as queer performers do in classical music. And increasingly, I tend to think that we're not necessarily working within these systems as queer people, that we have a kind of sideline parallel system that maybe looks and feels very similar, but it is distinctly separate from mainstream classical music. And I have been struggling to find a word to call it. And I think I was speaking at a conference in Finland a month and a half ago, and I think the phrase I used was parallel, separate, not better or worse, but different. And that's so wordy and terrible. And maybe alternative classical is a better way to say that.
No, but I love that too, because it is parallel. It is iterating just in a little bit of a different slant, and this talk also of pivoting, right, was a huge word during COVID as well. And just turning our perspective just a little bit to open up to maybe open that shutter, like using camera metaphors now, like a little bit more. But so at the same time, like, I feel like I don't want to also put classical music and kind of these Western art forms on a pedestal and like they are the status quo and they are these big things, but that we can keep expanding this genre and make room for these queer artistries and these queer bodies and trans bodies within the classical medium. Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, I kind of like that idea because it opens it up to other audiences, I think. When I say to people, classical music, they go, oh, and they automatically think of something from 400 years ago. And they don't necessarily think of it using electronic technology or modern stuff or anything like that. So I think this is kind of good to get a new terminology which may encourage people to come into this sphere and watch these kinds of products.
Yeah, definitely.
Products more. No, these kind of production. Yeah. Some,
artworks, pieces.
Artworks.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like, I was just doing a music workshop the other day for one of the projects, this ongoing collaborative project I'm working with Renaissance Opera right now, called Eurydice Fragments. And we were one of my collaborators was exclaiming, like, like every pop song is a Passacaglia, basically, when you think about it. And I was like, huh? But it's true, because we have these repetitive forms and like, so looking at kind of what is popular pop culture, all of those forms and those patterns, and reflecting them back onto classical music, and then saying, what else can we do with what is popular, what is enjoyed, what is consumed these days, and like what people just like, or what I like, because I don't just like classical music. Exactly. And I don't like all pop, and I don't like all popular culture as well, but finding what I do like and maybe creating a new dish and putting different ingredients together is, I think, really exciting. And that's where the creativity lies.
Do you find in your experience doing these projects that are maybe using the nuts and bolts of quote unquote classical music and some nuts and bolts of many other things, that do you find any pushback that you get from classical music is that it is new, or is it that it's the content? Is it just that it's a thing that no one has encountered before and so it's scary, or is it the thing itself? And maybe that's also to put words saying that you've had pushbacks. Maybe you've had zero pushback, and that would be also phenomenal. But I know the classical music world, and I know how conservative it is.
Well, what's interesting, yes, I based on my experience, yes, I think that's part of it. But the and part of it is that, like, whatever pushback I have experienced, it's either like someone doesn't get back to you, they ghost you, they just completely say they're not interested based on not responding to your email, for example, or your many emails or many phone calls, right? Like reaching out to different producers or wanting to put your shows out there, for example. So that's definitely the type of pushback or lack of interest that I've experienced. But I also think it is what I've experienced firsthand, and also kind of within the community, certain people, maybe of certain generations or of certain thinking, is that it's not classical music. Like, it's breaking tradition. It's breaking away from tradition. It's not adhering to that kind of like elite art form, right? And so that is where I think it can be a bit destructive and dangerous, especially for young artists who are still trying to figure out who they are, what music they're making, like how they can make a living, how they can feel fulfilled with such narrow definitions of what good art is, what classical music is, or what an opera singer is. And that's where it can get dangerous, I think, because we are so permeable as young musicians, and we want to have feedback, we want to have validation, and that can sometimes set us off on not the most healthy, constructive paths as an artist.
So so when did, I mean, this is kind of interesting. I never really thought of this before. When did classical music become so conservative? I mean, I know it's always been like the thing, the music of the rich, and this kind of thing. But people were always changing and bringing new ideas. What some of the people, and this kind of thing. When suddenly why is it suddenly become old fashioned? I mean, I maybe I'm being silly question, but it's kind of like now there's this big break, whereas before it was always like things just developed and got new, and then it's like now we have such a different cultural difference between the two.
Yeah, I'm sure you both have fascinating answers about this too, but like what I can no, you're shaking
I
your
have no
head.
idea. I mean, I really don't have a clue. But I mean, it's kind of interesting from your perspective as
Mhm.
why your position would be very different from a classical musician 200 years ago.
Yes.
And because that would be the music of the time. Now, classical music is kind of this other music, which is not
Of
what most people
course.
listen to. So, I mean, it's kind of odd. It's become very conservative.
I think, there was a slow evolution, but what really, maybe two or three things that really changed it on its path, like that it fell out of favor as being like the most popular art form, was the development of, film, the
Mm,
microphone, so moving pictures. So as soon as we
mm,
got people on the big screen, on the silver screen, and moving pictures, and that celebridom became the top thing that people or the mass culture wanted to see, were celebrities. So they
mm.
used to be the opera singers. They were the
Yeah.
celebrities of
Yeah.
communities, of cities, and they were regarded as such for decades, for centuries. And so moving pictures, silver screen, and also the microphone, we started to develop different ways of singing
Mm,
to large audiences using the microphone and not having to project the voice in
mm,
such a way anymore. And then building stadiums. So definitely the last century, we've seen
mm,
that shift. We've always had kind of cabaret or folk music or salon music in small venues, so people didn't necessarily have to project like an opera singer
mm.
does all the time, over an
Yeah.
orchestra for 1,000, 2,000 seat theaters. But yeah, so I would say microphone and moving picture is probably what's done it.
Mm. So this is, you're going to retake the ground here and pull classical music. I can see this happening. Yeah, it's kind of
Well, I
nice
don't know.
idea.
It's just exciting to use all the materials and ingredients and technologies that are there. It's like, why not?
Yeah, yeah. Bach,
And
he used new pianos and new things. So why shouldn't anyone use this new stuff? Yeah.
exactly, other composers, pushing against whatever harmony rules that were of their day and wanting to expand their idea of what music was, what good music was, what
Mm,
beautiful or emotional music was. Like there were always people at the forefront of expanding and pushing this art form. And so
mm,
I think we're just in a different phase right now with that.
It's funny you say that. I mean, I tell the undergrad students I teach all the time that like we think of Beethoven as Beethoven, great. We think of Bach as Bach, fine. But like in their time, they were the weird new music that like people were going to see these small little concerts of the most avant-garde, strange. It's so outside of the norm. And I don't know. I to kind of mirror Sammy. I don't have a great answer for where we lost that feeling. I mean, I think I have. It's really interesting you talk about film and microphones. I think that's a really um like very interesting take on that, and I will need to like noodle on that more because I think there's something really fascinating about that uh that kind of like timeline of why and how. But I think we somewhere have lost the spirit of in classical music that new is good, that
mm,
new is exciting. And I think that's where queer creation really shines. I think that's truly where queer collaboration can inject life back into. And it's through things like taking all the things that you have available to you, electronics, use the medium, computers, microphones, and classical music, and synthesize and like create something. And so many of your projects are doing these things that are like truly queer in the sense of where you're
Mm.
drawing them from, but it is an injection into classical music. It is an injection into what we can call good performance. I think it's wonderful. We should listen to one. We should now like listen to one of your projects. Let's what do you think we should listen to first? Maybe The Queen and Me would be a good place to start. What do you
Sure.
think?
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a bit about this project and then we'll have a listen.
Yeah. It was about 8 years ago when I started creating The Queen and Me. I was between performances on a contract in Germany, and so I was back in Toronto, kind of twiddling my thumbs and trying to figure out, is this going to be my life? You know, flying here and there and kind of waiting for the next gig, whether it was, you know, kind of fulfilling or not really fulfilling, and figuring out, okay, how am I going to make rent? You know, that kind of thing. And I had been performing the role of the Queen of the Night from the Magic Flute for a while, and also just losing joy in performing the role, because often you jump in because someone is sick to do, you know, to sing this role, especially in Europe. And it just felt like it was like, okay, the morning you come in, you sign your contract, you watch an archive video of the staging, you have a costume fitting, you talk to this assistant director and this assistant and that assistant. Maybe you'll have a quick music rehearsal. Sometimes you don't. You quickly talk to the conductor for 5 minutes. Then you're doing the show, you know, and then it's over. And so it just felt really like unfulfilling, but also like from a artistic, dramatic like perspective, in terms of what really drew me into these stories as a teenager was that I could go deep into these characters and try to understand like what's the psychology behind the choices that they're making on stage, and why the composer set the music XYZ for this specific character at this specific moment in the show. And so The Queen had always been sitting with me since I was a teenager. It was actually the first opera that I ever saw, Ingmar Bergman's 1975 film, which I loved because everything was so close up and you can see like people's wrinkles and their makeup and their sweat. And I know they're lip syncing, but they did a really good job, you know, like capturing that moment. And it was filmed in one of those Baroque theaters that still operates. Maybe, Samantha, you've been to it, because I think it's in Sweden, right?
Was it?
Maybe?
I don't, but probably if it was Bergman, yeah.
I'm going to look it up later and let you know. You know, they they still use hydraulics to like operate different set pieces and things like that. And so it felt like a magical storybook, 3D storybook was coming to life on the screen for me. And so I was reflecting like, what is the Queen of the Night doing off stage? You know, because she's only in the opera for maybe 12 minutes, 10 minutes for this like 2.5 hour, 2 hours and 45-minute plus opera. Everyone goes away humming the lick, the coloratura lick that she does with the 5 high Fs. Mm-hmm. And we don't really know what happens to her. It just says versinken in the score over 2 bars, and that's it. And then I was like, okay, well, does she die? Does she go to hell? Does she just kind of like, you know, skunk off kind of to, you know, stage left? So it was kind of a creative exercise for me to talk to this character in my mind. But then I started talking to my colleagues about it. Like, what is she doing? What does she sound like? Like, who is she? Why is she so upset? Why does she need this 7-fold circle of the sun? And why can't she do it herself? Why does she need Tamino and then Pamina to do the work for her? Like, I wanted to know why. And so I started writing a show. And what happens is that we start in media res in my show, The Queen and Me, singing De Hölle Rache. And right before the high Fs come, she stops. She's like, I'm done. I don't want to sing anymore. We need to stop this opera. And she's just fed up. She's fed up with having to perform the same role in the same way for 235 plus years, or however many years it's been. and realizes that so many other characters like her in the operatic canon, they are just being portrayed the same way, in a misogynistic way, in a sexist way, in a way that continues to depict women in harmful ways. And also for the sopranos who are playing these roles, and the gender nonconforming soprano who is playing the Queen of the Night in that specific show. So the Queen in my show goes on to advocate for all of these inequities in opera, in the industry, in the canon, and advocates eventually for the opera singer who is playing her, which is me at the end. Yeah. So this is an excerpt called The Opera Singer, and it's a lighter moment in the show. So we go back and forth to kind of like these different monologues, which lead into different arias that the Queen is compelled to sing because she loves to sing. She loves the music, just like I love the music of this art form, and I'm compelled to still sing.
We'll take a listen then.
Demure, diminutive, dainty, delightful. Wouldn't it have been nice if they were born a lyric soprano? You know, the one with the luscious waves of hair, long enough to still remain virtuous. Big, bright eyes. Skin of porcelain, soft and slight. Botticelli's Venus, assigned female at birth and born to delight. No worry line to ever taint the brow, to love man and to be loved by all as the only state of plight. Never have to sing too high or too low, always just right. The Goldilocks effect. Imagine you are the titular love interest, opposite il tenore. And if you don't get your man in the end, you will always die a dignified death of A, tuberculosis, or B, a broken heart, or C, an honorable self-inflicted suicide. No psychotic breaks, no extreme high notes, no extended cadenzas that last twice as long as the aria itself, and all will be sung on awe, yet filled with a myriad of emotion. 9! You simply hang out somewhere downstage right, with a few lamenting oohs and ahs until the duet turns into a tercet, into a quartet, and back into a duet, dragging onto another sad aria, to finally die of a highly infectious lung disease, also while coughing and singing opera. How romantic! Demure, diminutive, dainty, and delightful. Are the lips round enough for you, maestro? How did you like that? Don't talk too much. Do what they tell you to do. You're a soprano, aren't you? Be nice, play nice. Hate yourself on your own time.
This is quite a personal story, then, really, that you've written.
Yeah, it definitely became that way.
And I mean, how much? I mean, obviously, it's in terms of her feelings about the inequities and this kind of thing. Did you? you've already partly explained how you came about this, but is this kind of like how much of it did you draw on from your own life, in addition to the sort of the opera singer bit of it? Did you kind of go, hey, I'm reflecting other parts of my life and other people's lives, as well? Was that part of the big input?
So much. It's quite biographical for sure. Like I've definitely pulled from experiences that I've had in rehearsal rooms, in audition rooms, at networking events, on the stage, in dressing rooms, different things like that. Like some of these words are verbatim, that things have been said to me or behind my back, or so it's quite personal, and it definitely takes a lot of emotional energy to like get back into the role, like whenever I'm doing a production, and then to kind of come down from that. Like in a way it's therapeutic, but it's also like coming really close to these, I dare I say, like traumatic events. And so I do feel like I'm healing myself every time I come to it. And there is such a there is a distance, because I am playing a character, and because I get to be this kind of outrageous, bombastic character, and I do the whole thing in a German accent, which definitely helps. And the costume, it's huge. It's just over the top, extravagant. But at the end, I tear off my costume and I reveal my body, and I'm standing there half naked, still singing. And so it's like people see me literally and figuratively stripped down to who I am. And so it's very much like a love story to this art form as well, and bearing my soul to everyone and thanking them for witnessing the hour-long show as well.
I mean, that was what the sort of follow-on question was, if you found this very cathartic doing it. But I mean, I can imagine it's a really emotional toll on having to. I mean, I can't. I'm trying to think if I had to but bare your soul to people literally night after night. It's that must be quite an emotional toll.
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
I did. I mean, it wasn't much of a question there, but it kind of just shocks me that to do this, because to actually expose yourself in a sense artistically. I mean, a lot of people do it, but they're doing it on somebody else's story.
Yes,
but
of course.
on your own story, it's I could not fathom that out for myself, if you know what I mean, doing it. And that kind of,
for sure.
Sort of, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I can't, if you know what I mean. It's so difficult to see how you would do that, and just bear that soul to people.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say it's masochistic in that I'm hurting myself. I've about 8 years ago is when I started working with a director, Andrea Donaldson, who is the artistic director of Nightwood Theatre here in Canada. And she's an amazing artist, an amazing dramaturge, director, and person who just holds space for the art, for the artist. And because she knew nothing about opera when we first started working together, I had to be really clear and explicit about like what the inner workings of the industry are, and kind of that insider baseball talk. And so it helped me clarify, I think, the story or the message that I was trying to get to in this show. And also she works from like a very care-centered practice as well. So we built together a show that is also taking care of like Teiya in the show, even though I'm playing a character. So I feel like that every time I do the show, somehow I feel stronger to keep going as an artist in this industry, despite all the shit. Sorry, I just swore. I'm not sure if I'm able to do that on your podcast. Okay, great. I like to use these fancy words sometimes.
Swear words, yes, it's fine.
Okay, great. So just trying to grain my thought here. Sorry. So every time that I do perform this show, yes, I feel stronger emotionally, mentally, Physically, on the other hand, I always joke, like, who wrote this show? Because vocally, it is so tiring. It is so difficult to go back and forth from like very elevated acting, speaking to full on opera singing. And yes, I'm mic'd specifically for the speaking. And then when I'm speaking over top of the piano or the orchestra, and I get really like emotionally heightened and I'm almost like yelling at that point. But then to switch back for the whole vocal mechanism, it's extremely tiring. So I do have to take breaks. Like I can't, it's very difficult to do back-to-back shows, for example. So I'm putting that care into my contract so I can make sure that I'm taking care of my voice.
Very important. It's the Phantom of the Opera. No more than 5 high A's a week or whatever that contract is. But it is important. It is very, very vital. You've performed this show in some wonderful places, and it's again, we've been talking about working within these systems and kind of having this conversation is one thing from outside. Having this conversation from within is a really different thing. Doing this at like the National Arts Center or any of these places has a really different feel to it, I'm sure. What does it feel like to do this on some of these stages?
That actually was so much fun, the National Arts Center. It still resonates with me with one of the best experiences I've ever had in terms of like the people who work at that company, like from the top right to the down to the ground, like everyone and in between were so professional, so kind, and so welcoming. And it just felt great to be there and to be myself and to walk around, you know, getting my mic taped and to have my shirt off and to not feel like, oh, am I okay to do this? Am I trans enough to do this? You know, am I being inappropriate? You know, but like, we're just bodies and we're just artists trying to make art. So it was wonderful. They were all wonderful. We had sold out shows. We had standing ovations every night and like lovely feedback as well. There were a bunch of high school students that came that identify as trans and queer, and I got to speak to them afterwards as well. And just to see that my story is resonating with young people and older people, I was very happy about that. And also that it's like I feel like I'm waking up some people who are, you know, see opera and know opera as one thing, and they're starting to open up their aperture and wider, or their shutter wider for like what is actually happening in this industry. So that was really affirming for me as well.
It's really lovely.
I think you're also opening up people just to see trans people on stage. I mean, and not being ashamed of themselves, which is something we all carry with us. You know, we all feel ashamed about things and our bodies and this kind of stuff. And so to have that somebody do that, I think is really fantastic and really empowering for younger people and older people to see every time it happens. I think so. So I think that's a real positive. So great job there. I think it's
Thank you. Yeah, like I know seeing trans people like on social media or on stages or on the screens and different shows that I watch, like it's so powerful for me, and it's so it just gives me hope. It gives me motivation to continue to try to be real and truthful. And so I know it's important for me. So I can do a little bit of that. That makes me really happy too.
Yeah, I think this is the thing. I think why I think our community is so good at the moment is that we've got more people, particularly younger people like yourself, standing up and saying, "Hey, you know, I'm not afraid to be like this, and I'm telling my story in the true story of myself." And I think that's a real positive thing. I mean, we've seen this before with the rest of the queer community, people standing up and saying, "Hey, this is our lives." You know, we saw it in the big gay movements of the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and this. And I think it's we're seeing this with trans people. So I think this is a fantastic thing to highlight this. So I wish all the luck with this. It's fantastic and fantastic
Thank you.
show. So I'd love to see it sometime. I don't know if you're going to be over in northern Sweden at any point, but there we go.
Well, that would be so cool. Like, if you know anyone, I would love to go to Scandinavia. I've never been to that part of the world, and it just seems really cool. So, hey, we could talk later.
we were always joking. We should put on, with all the people we meet, we say we should put on a show in somewhere up here in the sort of the Arctic, in the snow and all this kind of thing. So there you go, Jacob. Yeah. Your new career as a producer of shows. I can see that.
Remote shows. I mean, increasingly though, we've had a number of people from Finland. Sam Taskinen.
I follow Sam on Instagram. It's so
Sam was on the podcast. Sam's in Finland and not that far. It was only a 2-hour flight from Finland to Stockholm.
Only we could do it.
That's totally true. And Adrian Angelico, he's in Norway. So there you go.
A whole cast going.
I've got another friend, Holden Madagami. There we go. Madagami is in Berlin. So, Central Europe too. If you want it, they can fly over.
We got a new show coming on. I can see it.
It's perfect. It's good. We should talk about some of your other projects. So the Butterfly Project, to switch gears a tiny bit, tell us about this one.
Yeah. So I got my first gig to sing Cho-Cho-San in late 2018, and then the performance was going to be in early 2020, which did happen. It was January with the Windsor Symphony Orchestra. And I've gone through multiple soprano Fachs in my life so far, and so I never thought I would ever even sing Butterfly because of where I started, like soubrette, light lyric coloratura, and I never really paid attention to this opera, even though it was like the Japanese opera. But now I know it's an Italian opera trying to be about this Japanese story. Anyway, no, there are some things, right? And like, I also visited Puccini's home in Torre del Lago. I think it was maybe in 2014 or 2015, around there. And he loved Asian culture. He loved Japanese culture, Chinese culture. Like, he's got so much furniture and artwork and interesting things in his home there. He never went to those countries, but he tried his best, he befriended the wife of this Japanese diplomat and really was interested in trying to, connect to something, and bring this story to life because he was so affected by it. And so I think I'm a little bit getting ahead of myself in terms of talking about Puccini, but bringing it back to why this project happened and why it's kind of this iterative thing is that I wanted to figure out how a person of Japanese descent in the 21st century who's trans, could sing this role still and still make it my own and not feel like I'm being tokenized or not feel like I have to step into a box that is very limited of this 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old geisha of the Meiji era, of the early 1900s. It just felt really odd. At the same time, wanting to sing this glorious music that Puccini composed because it felt so good in my voice. And that's one thing that continues to bring me back to opera is the visceral feeling of singing, of having sound resonate through my body. And that's why it's one of the reasons why it's so hard to step away from this art form and from this industry. And so it just became kind of a very kind of introverted, self research project to be where did Puccini get these melodies from? Where are these folk songs from? And I learned they're not all folk songs. One of them, he quotes the Japanese national anthem, which has kind of a controversial history still to this day. And some of these are melodies from pieces like Nagauta or Ji-uta, which are specific art forms in Japanese music And so that was really fascinating to start to just touch on the surface of like what Japanese music art forms are out there and what they still are performing today, and how they evolved through kabuki or no or gagaku, like court music, and how they have different hierarchies in their system as well, that like how it's comparable to the Western classical system, and how there was court music here. And, you know, we've got our commedia dell'arte and all these different kind of like offshoots of opera. And so all of that was just fascinating to me, but also like some of the melodies he uses, especially the one at the very end where Butterfly is taking her life. It's a very kind of like light, frivolous folk song that you would see a performer play on a shamisen, which is a 3-stringed instrument that is played with this big kind of pick. And it just feels very light and just like, oh, you know, what's going on? We're down by the riverside here, and there's a willow, and, you know, what is life? What is going on? You know, and she's taking her life in this piece. So the juxtaposition I found so odd, like such a polarization, and sometimes interestingly similar, but not really. And at that time in the Meiji era, it was a huge push to Westernize. So the emperor wanted to bring in as many experts from whatever field. So musicians and composers were coming to Japan and teaching their methodologies. At the same time, you know, artists and scientists and engineers and everybody were also going out and sharing their information and learning out there as well. So there was this Austrian composer, musician, arranger who transcribed a bunch of Japanese melodies to piano arrangements. And this book is what ended up in Puccini's hands. So he had Western piano transcriptions, kind of like Liszt or something like that, right? Yeah. And so
what a mix up of things.
Totally, right? So very pianistic, very much rooted still in like Western harmony, which is something that I found really interesting of like different Japanese composers around the same time and a little bit later, like Yamada, for example, taking these Japanese melodies and trying to set them into like Western harmonic structures, which I found really beautiful and interesting in his own right. He wrote over like 600 songs. He wrote some operas. He wrote tons of orchestral pieces. Really like a huge quantity of music he wrote. Getting sidetracked. Sorry about that. But see, like there was just so much I was uncovering. Like I literally feel like I was at the tip of the iceberg, and it depends how. That's why it became an iterative project, because I could just go deeper and deeper every time I came to it. And so it became kind of this meditative thing. Like I wanted to also engage with the ghost of Cho-Cho-san. Like, who is she? She died at 18. She could have had a different life. You know, she had this enduring faith and also this honor that led her down the path that she chose for herself. And so, yeah, I kind of wanted to just have a conversation with her in my heart as well. So that's part of the piece too. Like I start at the end of Puccini's opera, kind of with that heartbeat melody before, she's picking up the dagger to end her life. And so it's a bit of a internal conversation that I get to have with Cho-Cho-san that uses electronics. So I was dabbling in Ableton and Logic and bringing in like other sounds like the koto, the shamisen. I haven't brought in like shakuhachi or fue yet, because you can't replicate, something synthetic, like after you've experienced those real instruments and from really accomplished musicians. So one day I would love to, work with musicians who are super accomplished in those instruments and realize this with those instruments. But so I did an iteration at the Toronto Summer Music Festival last summer with Andrea Wong, who is a violinist, a new media sound artist, and she also works with electronics as well. So she had her electric violin plugged in, and we were playing with different pedals and looping. I also have a voice looper. And so just kind of jamming, there are these jam sessions that we go on, like Sakura, for example, that really famous Japanese song is one of those jams that we do. And, I'm playing the piano to the best of my ability in some of these, but one day we'll have an accomplished pianist that will take over that position. So it's a lot of multitasking. But yeah, it'll just keep evolving.
Well, let's have a listen. So when is the next time you think you'll get to do this again? Do you have an upcoming, either current iteration or a further iteration of the project? Do you have one on the books?
Nothing scheduled yet. However, I'm in the process of coordinating a recording for this.
Oh,
So I met this, I met this really amazing koto player. Her name is Miyama McQueen Tokita. She is Australian Japanese, based in Tokyo, and rocks out on the koto, which is really cool. So she knows like the classical jiuta style and sings and plays also at the same time, depending on the piece, but also plays a lot of pieces that have been composed, in the last few decades for the instrument as well, kind of this like neoclassical Japanese style for it. So we've been talking.
We're going to have to get you to give us a guide afterwards for Japanese instruments. That's the next. We're going to have an hour-long guide of all these instruments. Some of them I'm going, I have no idea what they are. And so next time.
I'm still very much learning too, very much an amateur. But I will totally help you out and give you all the knowledge that I have, and then hopefully set you on your way to learn more. And then you can tell me after. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But the koto is kind of like, it's a multiple stringed instrument that you would play like kneeling down or sitting down usually. And so there's a bridge. And so you're plucking it with different little kind of picks on your hand or little things that go on your fingers. Yeah, that's that instrument.
Nice.
And so, and there's another shamisen player who's out in Vancouver, Noriko Kim Kobayashi, who I'm collaborating with on kabuki and opera and kind of looking at the gender bending stuff in there, and also how kabuki and Baroque opera are kind of overlapping as well. So I want to work with her on this project, and violin, piano, maybe a little taiko, drums, Japanese drums, and then maybe some shakuhachi and fue, depending on the budget. So
a big orchestra for this thing. You're going to have.
I know. So, you know what I was using? I was using a YouTube track from these orchestral karaoke kind of style tracks that they used to produce in the 60s that like people could sing along to the orchestra. So it has like a violin lead of the melody, but it just gives you the best hits of the opera, and then people could sing along. And so, yeah, I would need to hire an orchestra. I was going to blow my budget, but
you just need
that would be really cool.
Now you sample it all and just play it back
Yes.
as a sampler. That's the thing.
Totally.
Or we
So
could pressure the Canada Council. They
Yeah.
They need
yes.
to pony up a little more money. They need to be doing better.
Over here tomorrow to complain.
No, but this is like a down the road project that I would definitely love to produce, because I feel like it could be realized in such a cool way. You know, we were talking about expanding opera and technology, and I think this could be one of those examples for sure.
This is, I mean, when we talk about like an exciting project like that, it frustrates me so much to hear then about the upcoming normal opera projects that are happening, because it just reeks so much of like, we could be doing this, like we could be doing these other, and that's not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can also do the other stuff. I'm not ever suggesting that we stop performing traditional Mozart, but we can do traditional Mozart and this. Like we could also do this. And how cool would it be to get to, I mean, you know, the Canadian Opera Company is like, you know, you go see one night and then you go see this the next.
I mean, you say Madame Butterfly, but honestly, I'm fed up with seeing Madame Butterfly as it is. You know, you see the same set of things. You see the same, everyone dressed up and they put makeup on to look like this and they do this and they do the same thing again. And it's beautifully sung. I think it's, you know, and it's beautiful costumes and it's beautiful things. But I don't want to listen to it every time they do it. It would be, you know, it's getting something exciting in, you know, something completely different. And that's what is exciting about this. I think it's kind of, let's mix and match, have new stuff and old stuff. And oh, well, if we were the funding agency, you'd be fine. if Jacob and I decided you would be fine, trust me, you know. But
if only, oh my gosh. Thank you. Yeah, and even back to Mozart, like I've always thought of him as a rocker, like a rock star. Like, you know, Così fan tutte, the second act finale. Is it second act finale? First act finale. It just feels like a rock show. You know, like and all these like kind of like rock licks, like on you could hear like instead of the violin, just have an electric guitar and like a whole band right behind, and produce like Mozartica. You know?
I mean, I was watching. Yeah, I was seeing a show they did of I can't remember which opera it was now, but one on here, and maybe it was Figaro or something like that. And it was modern, and they'd modernized it a lot, and it was all and it was so different, you know. And the story was modern. They just, you know, kept the music but changed the rest of it, and it was really interesting as a part. I mean, it's not uninteresting, but it gives you a different view. So let's get some modern opera and get things going. I think it's Oh wow! Well, we've got another plan then.
Taking over the opera industry.
Yeah.
It needs to be taken over.
Yeah, it needs to be taken. But before we go on, though, let me just say, because we haven't said this already, you've got a fantastic voice, and I think absolutely beautiful, and I loved listening to it, and I'm going to listen to it again after this. It is really beautiful. So really appreciate that. So just because if we haven't said it, and I think we need to. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. Music to my ears. Thank you.
So what is on the horizon for you? I mean, you always kind of have a bunch of projects, but what are the things you're kind of looking at right now? I mean, we have to talk about Misgendered, of course.
Yeah, Little Misgender, yes.
But what other things do you have? But maybe let's start with Little Misgender.
Okay, let's start with Little Misgender. So this was a project that I was developing during an artist residency at U of T. At the Bonham Center for Sexual Diversity Studies. I was their artist in resident 2021-2022 season. And it started off with kind of thinking about how closely knit voice categories, or, you know, Fach or Fachs or Fächer, however you want to understand that, are so closely knit to gender expectations and prescribed gender expressions. So, you know, being a soubrette, for example, and performing all of those roles, like one needs to be petite, one needs to be cute, slim, cunning, you know, yes, attractive, whatever that means in kind of a feminine way, sly, but not too, you know, too out there, too dominant, right? It's always this like having to fit perfectly into this box based on this voice category and the roles you're playing. Or then if you're a lyric soprano, you need to be kind of a certain height between this and this. So you're not too much taller than the tenor, and usually a certain color of hair and a certain ample bosom, you know, also again, slim, but not too slim, but not too over this or too big, you know, like it was just ridiculous in terms of like what I was seeing on the stage, what was said or not said. There's so much about what's not said that you get information from in terms of like how you had to behave and how you had to look based on your voice type. And this was through my training. This was through my, you know, my professional young training at the Canadian Opera Company and just being in the industry for almost 20 years now and seeing what they're putting on stage. And so I thought of these little children's books that I had come across as a child, like the Little Miss and Mr. Men books by Roger Hargreaves. Mm-hmm. And again, very binary, very prescriptive in like how a little girl should behave and how a boy or a man should behave. And this just irked me, but it also like realized how ingrained it was in me and how ingrained it was in kind of like my identity as a trans person, as a non-binary person, and struggling with that, like struggling with like, oh, I'm not trans enough, or that's too butch, or that's too femme, or I can't, you know, wear makeup anymore because I'm trans now, or I'm like butch now, or I'm this now. You know what I mean? And just like struggling with like, why do I have to choose? And why am I like getting so emotional or so up in arms about all of this? And so this became kind of an interesting exploration that this young person wants to be an opera singer. We've called them so far Little Miss Gender, but you know, this show is very much in flux right now in development. And so they go on this journey to Fachland, and to meet the all-knowing, all-superior Mutterfächer, motherfucker, to get facht, to like, because there's such an obsession as well in young opera singers to like figure out, what is my fach? What is my voice type? What is my voice category? What can I sing? What 5 arias am I going to put on my package? And how am I going to present myself? And being kind of obsessed with this. And to a certain extent, like I haven't done an audition like that in quite a few years now, but like I still was quite obsessed with that. Like, how am I presenting myself in these 5 songs that I want people to hire me and see all the things that I can do? And it just felt so hard because it was like, well, I want to sing that mezzo role and I want to do this dramatic soprano role, but I also can still do this crazy coloratura role. But then it's like, oh, but I really connect to this other mezzo. You know what I mean? So it was like, people are like, Teiya, what are you doing? Like you're you know, you're like 3 people right now. And I'm like, but aren't we all? We are more than just one thing, right? We're more than one fach or one gender expression. And you know, we keep evolving and growing as people as we walk through this life. So, okay, so Little Miss Gender wants to go to Fachland, get facht. So the Determinator, which is it's like this big giant, you know.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Exactly. The Determinator comes, you know, is like this big vacuum thing, sucks onto Little Miss Gender's face and tries to determine their fach and can't. So their results are error. They have no fach. So they have to go through this process to get determined. And it's called the rite of passaggio. And so it's kind of like a big vocal competition, you know, because that's another big thing that I've done many times is like, again, you present yourself in these forums and you are judged and you are criticized and you are either, you know, yes, you're amazing and your fach matches your gender, or it doesn't. And you're like, there's the door. Which, you know, I'm boiling down my life right now, but in a very harsh way. But like, So the excerpt that I have for you is Little Miss Gender has decided to take this tincture, this potion, to help them get through the rite of passaggio, because they're not sure how they're going to sound, and they don't want to be classified as this like light lyric coloratura thing. So they stand up there and they say, Jugendliche dramatischer Tenor. You know, they want to be a young dramatic tenor. And so what happens is that the tincture makes their voice all discombobulated. So we hear different arias and different fox, and like I'm singing up here, I'm singing way down there. And this was an experiment that I wanted to try for this show. And so that's what you're going to hear.
Okay,
Amazing.
Take a listen then, yeah.
Jocks and frocks, put your hands together for Little Miss Jen. What's that now? Was not Miss either? Okay, yeah, got it. Our dearest little ladies and finest gentle sirs, it is my greatest pleasure to bienvenue you to our stage, Little Mix Mox. Little Mox Gender. Mix Gender. Little Mox up Gen Mixing Genetics. This makes no sense. MXGNDR. Fuck us. Tell us your fuck.
Jugendlicher dramatischer Tenor.
what you've just said about your experiences are kind of like a reflection of society, really, on particularly. I mean, I think now on how people are treated. I mean, and particularly women. A woman can be too this, too that, too the other. They could be too quiet, if they're too noisy, they're no good. They've got to be quiet enough, but they've got to be this, that, and the other. And the expectation on everyone, and I know it's true of everyone, is so, you've got to be like this. And in my own experience, I now feel, because I identify as a trans woman, identify as a woman, I feel like there are things that I can no longer do because they're too masculine. And I kind of have to catch myself and go, no, it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't change who you are, and it's okay to be like that. But it's so ingrained, you kind of feel you're doing the wrong thing. You kind of feel negative about it, and it's a mess. So I think it's kind of a great reflection on the rest of society too. In many ways, it's kind of
Oh, wonderful! Like, I have reflected on that. Like, opera feels like kind of a microcosm of the world, and it's just magnified. In the best ways and also in the worst ways, and then every way in between. And so I do really feel the resonance of like, oh, this is what other people are going through in the world, or could be, this just happens to be kind of in a more like operatic context, but it's so true, being conditioned and socialized as a girl and a young woman, like it sticks with you, or depending on how you look or how you're perceived, right? Like, people will often react to that. It's like, oh, are you behaving in the way that is you're supposed to be behaving? Like, just coming from the airport yesterday, I get sirred and ma'amed in the same day, within the same hour, depending on the person, depending on how the person sees me or hears my voice or perceives my body or perceives my body language. Like if I maybe I don't open a door for someone because of how I look, and I maybe just do it for myself.
Yeah.
Or if I'm being too kind, or if I'm in that washroom versus this washroom, like, it's it's a mess, but it's also very interesting to reflect on it when I can feel calm and safe about it. But usually, it's about navigating self-safety in those moments too. So yeah, that's a whole nother story. It just also makes me realize, I want to put my energy into creating really wonderful work and spaces with people that have similar values to me, and it just tends to be like really queer, which is great. So that's great.
I mean, that's something we often come to on this show is obviously we interview queer people, and queer spaces are fantastic, and we all gravitate towards them because they're our people, and we feel comfortable. And I don't know about you, but I feel safe in a queer space. I don't feel safe in a cisgendered, non-queer space. It's
totally. It's like you can like let that go, let your diaphragm just like actually drop down, and then you can and then that's when I feel like the joy and the creativity and the curiosity can start to really like take over and cultivate and blossom, as opposed to like you're holding yourself together on so many different planes and spheres just to kind of like survive and get through it, even though it like maybe you never get misgendered that day or something, but you're just kind of always on guard a little bit, or at least that's how I feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like, sorry, go ahead.
You have to protect yourself.
Yeah, and it's something that like I don't even think about consciously so much anymore. It's just like I'm always like, okay, leaving the house, that kind of thing, or bracing. It's that idea of like bracing, and which is wearing on the body and the psyche.
I mean, my wife always says that as well. She says that she can see when I'm when we go out shopping or something in a cis space, I'm a bit more like, looking like this. And she said when she was at Pride last year, a Pride event, she said, I've never seen you so queer. You're like completely off the wall, sort of thing. I said, I kind of mean that as I should, because you're in the space which allows you to be that way. So
yes, exactly. And the care that has been cultivated in certain queer spaces, in these queer workspaces or in these queer community spaces, like I feel like those lessons or those values can be transferred to these predominantly cisgendered spaces as well, whether it's like, you know, a giant opera company and that work culture, or whether it's, you know, being at the airport waiting in line, or it's, I don't know, anything in between, or getting a sandwich or getting a coffee, and, you know, just paying attention to who the person is, who you're talking to, the clues that they're giving you, or the cues that they're giving you, so you don't accidentally misgender someone or make someone feel uncomfortable, you know, but you can just be like, hi, how are you? As opposed to hi, sir, hi, ma'am, you know, and then keep driving it in, you know, because of cultural expectation that it's like, we must, you know, give these greetings of respect and then just hammer them in such a binary, or I don't know. Anyway.
I mean, I think you said this one, Jacob, about you know, the fact just our mere existence. I think you were saying at one point in spaces makes them queer. You know, actually being there and actually just being yourself, and like you in your operas, you know, just being there and being who you are actually makes that space that way. And I think that's one of the strengths maybe of just being visible in this case.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've been thinking about in this Dichterliebe that I'm doing in a couple of weeks. Like, can it just be queer because I'm doing it? You know, because it's coming through my body and through my voice. Because it doesn't often come through a soprano voice, one. And when does it come through a queer voice or a queer body or a trans body? Not so often, right? And so I was thinking like, oh, do I need to change pronouns in the German? Do I need to rewrite songs? Do I need to like put things into English? And you know, there is a little bit of English in this show, I'm not going to lie. But I also love what was written and the tradition. And like, I can read this Heinrich Heine poem and being like, yeah, that's really queer, because I'm thinking about it and it's coming through my voice in the context that I'm setting it up in. So it's like, do I need to change so much to make it queer, or is it just inherently queer because I'm doing it? So that's a question I've been contending with my collaborator David Eliakis as well.
I mean, I guess good poetry, good music should actually elicit those responses from whoever they are. So you should see it as queer, or you should see it, if your sis is cis, you should be able I mean, that's what I think good music and good poetry does. So
totally,
you take it on and make it yours. And
yeah, definitely. And like, for me, I feel like it's already showing some defiance against my teachers and mentors from my past who said, no, you can't sing that because then you're singing about another woman or a girl. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, so I can only sing about songs that are about men because, you know, I was assigned female at birth and at that moment in time, you know what I mean? Like, so it just, those kinds of comments, like they warp you, or they have warped me. And so now, like, when I'm singing about a song with she, her pronouns, or he, him pronouns, or they, them pronouns, or whatever pronouns, it's like, it's okay. that it is what it is. Yeah.
It's a song. I mean, that's the thing.
Yes.
It's not, you know, we have this all the time with these things, like, you know, characters that are one or the other, or whatever it is. And it's just, they're just characters. I mean, you know, I kind of feel we're trying to prescribe too much to characters in a play or something. You know, why can't they be queer? Why can't they be the other gender? You just don't know. I mean, you know, you can make any story up you want.
Problem sometimes with oh, you're back.
Oh, sorry, did you lose me?
We did, unfortunately.
Don't worry. It's fine. It's fine. I was just rabbiting on about gender things. It's fine.
You were saying this is the problem, something, and then
did I? Okay.
And then you froze.
It's gone. I'm afraid I have a one track that it goes in, comes out once, and never again will you hear the same thing ever again.
You snooze, you lose. Okay. Cool.
I'm afraid so. Yeah. It's tough. You missed it. Sorry.
We'll pick it up. But I think it's maybe a great sentiment to kind of wrap up on that. I believe that anything that we as queer artists do renders a space queer. I think anything, no matter how straight presenting it is, by the nature of it being queer people doing it, it is queer. I had this conversation literally last night so I conduct the queer ensemble here in Halifax, the Halifax Queer Ensemble. And we had a new arrangement that one of our lovely members did of Blue Velvet, which, funny choice repertoire-wise. Great. Throwback, fantastic. Not inherently queer. And, the mission of the group is always to like perform as many queer composers as possible, to do as much queer music as possible. And we started this like, oh, she wore blue velvet, and I was like, is this all that queer? And I thought, it's so queer. We're all queer people doing this. Like, we're singing Blue Velvet in a little queer orchestra. It's the queerest thing we could possibly do.
I think that sounds really queer. Yeah. Just you singing it then sounded really queer, I think.
Super queer. And so the more we can do, the better in any context. And I'm so thrilled in all the contexts that you're doing, all the things you're doing. And I can speak for all of our listeners. I can firmly say we're very thrilled to have heard about everything that you're doing. And I really, really hope you come back once we can get David on the line too. And we can talk about Dichterliebe, and we can talk about all these other things that you're doing too.
Oh, what we do and our identities, they're just so like it's this beautiful kind of like echo and how it ripples out into the world. And this was really fun and affirming and joyous and just,
wonderful.
Flowy. So thank you.
Great. It's been great. So thank you so much. It's been lovely having you on the show.
Thank you.
So that's all for this episode. You've been listening to the Classical Queer Podcast, and Jake and I look forward to being with you next month. The incidental music is courtesy of Jared Miller, and the show was produced by Samantha Jane.